You know what's crazy? Most people spend 15 years in school learning algebra, chemistry, and historical dates they'll never use again. But nobody teaches them how interest works, how debt traps people, how taxes quietly remove a third of your income, or why some people stay broke no matter how much they earn. Then adulthood starts, and suddenly everyone expects you to understand money instantly. That's why so many people feel financially stressed even when they have jobs. Because income without financial education is like pouring water into a leaking bucket. My name is Jack, and I spend way too much time thinking about money systems, financial psychology, and why average people stay trapped financially for decades. If you're someone who works hard but still feels like money disappears too fast, hit subscribe and give this video a thumbs up, because this is probably the financial education you should have gotten at 16 years old. Here's the thing. Most people think financial problems come from low income. Sometimes that's true, but very often the real issue is financial behavior combined with a lack of understanding. According to multiple consumer finance studies, a huge percentage of people who receive salary increases still remain financially stressed within 1 year. Why? Because expenses expand to match income. This is called lifestyle inflation, and school never explains this psychological trap.
Look, imagine two people making the same salary. One person spends everything every month and upgrades their lifestyle every time income increases. Better phone, more subscriptions, more expensive car payment, more delivery food, more impulse purchases. The second person increases their lifestyle slowly, but redirects part of every raise into assets, emergency savings, or investments. 10 years later, those two people live completely different lives financially, even if they earn similar incomes the entire time. This is where it gets really interesting. Financial success is rarely about one giant decision. It's mostly about systems. Tiny, repeated decisions, repeated monthly behavior, repeated emotional control. School trains people to memorize information temporarily. Money requires long-term systems thinking. Completely different skill. One of the biggest things schools never teach is cash flow. Most people only focus on income, but cash flow matters more than salary. Someone earning $4,000 a month while spending $3,800 is financially weaker than someone earning $3,000 and spending $2,000. The second person has control. Margin matters. Surplus matters. Breathing room matters.
And yet, society constantly pushes people toward financial pressure. Monthly payments are normalized everywhere. Phones, cars, furniture, streaming subscriptions, buy now, pay later systems. Everything is optimized to reduce friction between emotion and spending. Companies understand human psychology extremely well, better than most consumers understand themselves. Now, you might be thinking, okay, but isn't debt normal? Some debt can be useful, but most consumer debt exists because people purchase future lifestyle with future labor. That's the trap. Credit cards allow emotional decisions today, while consequences arrive later. Your brain gets the dopamine immediately, while your finances absorb the damage slowly over months or years. Here's what most people don't realize. Humans are terrible at understanding delayed consequences. That's why interest works both ways. Investments compound slowly at first, then accelerate. Debt also compounds slowly at first, then becomes destructive later. A person carrying $5,000 on a credit card at 24% interest can spend years paying mostly interest instead of principal. Meanwhile, someone investing $300 monthly into index funds at average market returns could build significant wealth over decades. Same math system, different direction. And school never teaches compound interest in a practical, emotional way. They explain formulas. They don't explain life consequences. If you invest $300 per month starting at age 25 with average annual growth around 8%, by retirement, you could have hundreds of thousands or even over a million depending on time horizon and consistency. Delay starting by 10 years and the difference becomes massive. Time matters more than intensity. This is why financially educated people obsess over starting early instead of starting perfectly.
Another thing schools rarely explain is inflation. Inflation silently destroys purchasing power every year. If inflation averages 3% annually, your money gradually buys less over time. That means leaving large amounts of cash sitting unused for decades can actually reduce real purchasing power. Most people think saving money alone is enough. It isn't. Savings protect stability. Assets build long-term growth. Look, there are really 3 layers to financial survival. First layer, cash flow control, knowing where money goes. Second layer, protection, emergency savings, insurance, stability. Third layer, growth, investments, assets, ownership. Most people never reach layer 3 because layer 1 is broken. Think about how people spend emotionally. Stress increases spending. Anxiety increases convenience purchases. Low energy increases food delivery usage. Social media increases comparison spending. Modern consumer systems are engineered around emotional impulse. Financial discipline is no longer just math, it's psychological defense. This is why budgeting fails for many people, because they treat budgeting like punishment instead of automation. The goal isn't to manually suffer every month tracking tiny expenses forever. The goal is designing systems where good behavior happens automatically. For example, imagine someone earning $4,000 monthly. The moment salary arrives, $500 automatically moves into investments, $300 into emergency savings. Fixed bills are already separated, and discretionary spending gets isolated into a separate account. Suddenly, the system protects the person from emotional overspending. That's what financially stable people understand. Environment shapes behavior. Now, here's another thing schools should have taught: assets versus liabilities. An asset puts money into your pocket or increases long-term value. A liability takes money out continuously. The problem is, modern culture confuses expensive consumption with wealth. Someone driving a luxury car with giant monthly payments may actually be financially weaker than someone driving an older, paid-off vehicle while investing aggressively. Real wealth is often invisible. That's important, because financially struggling people often buy visible status, while financially stable people buy invisible systems. And social media made this problem worse. People compare lifestyles instead of balance sheets. They compare vacations instead of debt ratios. They compare aesthetics instead of cash flow. This creates financial pressure cycles where people spend money emotionally to maintain appearances. Here's a simple example. Imagine person A earns $6,000 monthly but spends $5,800. Person B earns $4,000 but spends $2,500 and invests the difference. 10 years later, person B likely has significantly higher net worth, despite lower income, because wealth is not income. Wealth is retained resources plus assets. That sentence alone should probably be taught in every school. Another thing people never learn early enough is emergency funds. Financial emergencies are not rare. Car repairs happen. Medical issues happen. Job loss happens. Unexpected expenses are mathematically normal. Yet millions of people operate with almost zero financial buffer. Without emergency savings, every problem becomes debt. And debt creates future instability. A basic emergency fund changes financial psychology completely. Even 1 to 3 months of expenses reduces panic significantly because the brain stops operating in survival mode constantly. This is where it gets really interesting psychologically. Financial stress damages decision-making quality. Studies show scarcity mindset reduces cognitive bandwidth. People under constant financial pressure make worse long-term decisions because the brain prioritizes immediate relief. That's why building financial margin improves not only money, but also thinking quality.
School teaches test performance under controlled environments. Adult finances operate under emotional pressure, uncertainty, and delayed gratification. Completely different skill set. Now, let's talk about taxes, because almost nobody understands them properly when entering adulthood. Many people think salary equals usable income. It doesn't. Gross income and net income are very different realities. Taxes, insurance, housing, transportation, food, and debt obligations reduce actual usable cash dramatically. This creates a dangerous illusion. Someone sees a high salary number and upgrades lifestyle too aggressively without calculating real disposable income. And this leads directly into paycheck dependency. Paycheck dependency is one of the biggest financial vulnerabilities in modern society. If missing one paycheck creates crisis, your financial system is fragile, regardless of income level. The goal is not looking rich. The goal is reducing fragility. Here's what most people don't realize. Financial freedom is not necessarily about becoming ultra wealthy. It's about increasing time flexibility and reducing panic. Someone with low expenses, investments, emergency savings, and multiple income streams often experiences more freedom than someone earning much more, but trapped in massive recurring obligations.
And schools almost never explain ownership. Employees trade time for money. Owners build systems that generate money beyond direct labor. This doesn't mean everyone must become a billionaire entrepreneur. Ownership can mean stocks, businesses, digital products, real estate, royalties, or anything producing income independent from hourly effort. That's why investing matters so much. When you buy broad market investments, you're purchasing tiny ownership pieces of productive companies. Over long periods, productive assets historically grow because businesses generate value, innovation, and profits. Meanwhile, many people spend decades consuming products without owning productive assets themselves. Think about that difference. One person buys products constantly. Another person owns the companies producing those products. Completely different financial trajectory. Now, obviously, investing carries risk. Markets fluctuate, short-term volatility exists, but historically, long-term diversified investing has outperformed idle cash over extended periods. Again, school rarely explains practical long-term investing behavior. They teach equations instead of economic participation. Another massive missing lesson is opportunity cost. Every purchase has hidden future value attached to it. Spending $1,000 today is not only losing $1,000, it's losing what that money could become over years if invested productively. This doesn't mean never enjoying life. That's unrealistic and emotionally unhealthy. The point is intentional spending instead of unconscious spending. Financial literacy is basically the ability to understand long-term consequences, and most consumer systems are optimized to keep people focused short-term. That's why subscriptions are powerful psychologically. Small recurring costs feel harmless individually, but 10 subscriptions totaling $200 monthly become $2,400 yearly. Invested over decades, that becomes enormous opportunity cost. Tiny leaks sink ships slowly.
Another thing schools should teach is negotiation. Salary negotiation, interest negotiation, contract understanding, financial confidence. Many people lose enormous lifetime income simply because they never learn to negotiate compensation properly. Even small salary increases compound massively across careers. An extra $5,000 annually invested over decades becomes significant. But confidence around money is usually learned through painful trial and error, because formal education ignores practical finance almost entirely. Look, the harsh reality is this. The financial world rewards people who understand systems. Banks understand systems. Corporations understand systems. Advertisers understand systems. Investors understand systems. Average consumers are often taught only consumption behavior. That imbalance creates predictable outcomes. Now, you might be thinking, okay, so where should someone start? Start with awareness. Track spending for 1 month honestly. Not emotionally, not judgmentally, objectively. Most people are shocked seeing where money actually goes. Second, build emergency savings before aggressive investing. Third, eliminate high-interest debt strategically. Fourth, automate investing consistently. Fifth, reduce lifestyle inflation when income rises. Simple principles, difficult emotionally, powerful long-term. And here's another critical point. Increasing income still matters. Financial education alone cannot solve severe income problems. But higher income without financial systems also fails. Both matter together. That's why some lottery winners go broke while disciplined middle-income investors quietly become wealthy over decades. Behavior beats intensity long-term.
Now let's talk about time, because time is the hidden currency underneath money. Every recurring payment represents future labor hours. A monthly car payment might represent 20 hours of work monthly after taxes. Framing spending through labor time changes perception dramatically. Wealthy people often think in asset acquisition. Average consumers often think in monthly affordability. That difference matters. Can I afford the payment? And is this financially intelligent? Are completely different questions. This is where consumer culture becomes dangerous. Modern advertising constantly encourages emotional identity spending. People buy products not only for utility, but also for status, comfort signaling, belonging, and emotional reward. Again, psychology. Financial literacy without emotional awareness remains incomplete. Because humans are not spreadsheets. Impulse, stress, insecurity, comparison, fear, and dopamine all influence spending behavior constantly. That's why sustainable systems matter more than extreme discipline. Extreme budgeting often collapses. Automated, moderate systems usually survive. And honestly, one of the biggest mindset shifts is understanding that money is a tool, not identity. Some people overspend because spending temporarily changes emotional state. Others hoard money because scarcity fear dominates decision-making. Healthy financial behavior requires balance between present enjoyment and future security.
Schools rarely teach emotional regulation around money, but money amplifies emotional patterns dramatically. Financial education should include how debt works, how taxes work, how investing works, how inflation works, how contracts work, how insurance works, how credit scores work, how behavioral psychology affects spending, how compound interest works, how emergency funds protect stability, and how ownership creates leverage. Instead, most people learn through mistakes, costing thousands or even decades. And the earlier someone understands these principles, the more powerful the outcome becomes, because time multiplies financial behavior. A financially intelligent 22-year-old with average income can outperform a financially reckless high earner over time. That's not motivational. That's mathematics. Here's the final thing schools should teach. Money problems are rarely solved emotionally. They're solved structurally. You don't fix overspending with motivation alone. You fix it with systems. You don't fix financial anxiety with positive thinking. You fix it with emergency savings and reduced fragility. You don't build wealth accidentally. You build it intentionally through repeated ownership, consistency, and controlled lifestyle growth. That's the real financial education most people never received. And honestly, once you see how the system works, you start understanding why some